Welcome to another episode of the OMGDGlobal presentation. We try to do it every month at the end of the month with a special subject. And today we have a really special guest that really I'm proud to say is not only a friend of mine, is also an expert in English wine and wine at all. Is Director of Wines in Great Britain, very important position here in the wine section. He learned all the things in the Wine and Spirit Education Trust and is now going for his diploma level 4 mission, which is so hard. You need to really you need to learn for 2-3 years to succeed. And he's a member of the Circle of Wine Writer. Is a consultant sommelier, and also is the brand ambassador for Breaky Bottoms Vineyards, which I had a pleasure being there with Dominic and taste some of the wines and discover some of the amazing wines made in Great Britain. You can find our all our we record everything. So hi Dominic. So you can see it on our channel on YouTube. It goes by the name YouTube OMGDGlobal. So everything that you see now, we can see it there. The presentation, itself that they use, we will put it in the Shen website on the OMGD page. And do not forget, we also on LinkedIn and also on Facebook. So, and also on Instagram, we have pages all over, so you can chat with us, ask questions, put some posts on whatever you drink or a nice wine, beer, or any alcoholic beverage you want to share with us. And it's going to be fantastic to share our love and passion to these beverages. I do hope that we can all meet again soon, face to face, really touch each other in the next OMGD Grand Chapitre, which we are planning to do, but we're not sure if it will happen because at the moment the world is a bit crazy. Without further ado, thank you again, Dominic, and of course, Philip, for having England and Britain presenting this lovely OMGD presentation. So Dominic, the floor is yours. And so everybody's muted, free to go.
Thank you,
Take it away.
Thank you very much. And thank you for inviting me to do this presentation today. And I should also say a special thanks to Helen Sunderland-Cohen for introducing me into the Shen, and to Philip Evans for being very supportive and helping us get a voyage going down here in Sussex, south of England, where I live. So I'm fairly new to the Shen, and as Tal has said, I have a strong interest in wine. I've been studying wine now for about 7 years in some detail. I've always been a wine lover, but my day job, I was a lawyer. I still am a lawyer, and all my wine interest I fit around earning a crust from lawyering for a company. It's an in-house counsel which helps subsidize the enjoyment I can get from sharing wine and discovering more about it. So I'm truly flattered that so many of you have come to listen to me waffle on this afternoon. It's 5 o'clock Sunday evening in the UK. It's a grey day. It's been drizzling most of today, but yesterday was lovely. And I'm sorry I wasn't at the awards dinner on Friday evening. I couldn't attend it because my wife and I had our postponed 50th birthday at the weekend. So we had, within the rule of 30, we had about 15 friends over. We got through about 6 magnums, various different wines. It were delicious. So I've been looking forward to doing this evening with a slightly sore head after last night. Now, I have prepared a few slides which I'm going to share with you, and hopefully they are now on the screen. Tal, if you can just shout, let me know that you can see them. Yeah, good. Okay. So, oh, I started at the back. Let's
Yes,
start.
you need to bring it to the front.
Yeah.
We start with,
Okay. So here we go.
that's it. Excellent.
Here's the front one.
We can see you.
Now, just got to do the slideshow. And
At the bottom, exactly.
there we go. Okay, good. So I'm talking about the wines of Great Britain today, which includes England and Scotland. Great Britain is the largest island of the British Isles. 98% of the wines made in Great Britain are made in England, but there are a few from Wales and one in Scotland. But when we talk about the wines of Britain, I wanted to really put it in context of our 2,000-year modern history. And to explain really what we do and why we do it, we really have to understand Britain's place in the world, not just geographically, in terms of how wine can grow here, but also politically. And the role we've had as a country in the international wine trade is quite an important part of how we are today, particularly as we're the largest importer of wine. We are massively more net importer than we are a producer of wine. We import 3.8 billion euros worth of wine today, more by volume than anyone else, any other country in the world. And our domestic wine production is just a tiny drop in the ocean in comparison to what we quaff normally. But what we do produce is generally very good, high quality, traditional method sparkling wine. So about 70% of the wines produced here are sparkling wines. I'm going to touch on a bit of the past, the present and the future, look at the regions, the climate in Britain, what works for wine here, and look at some of our initiatives for sustainability and also still wines, because a third of our wines are still red, white and rosé, and they deserve a good bit of attention as well, as that's a growing segment. So that's what I'm going to cover in the next 40 minutes. I'm very happy to take questions, preferably at the end, but if anyone has anything burning, please do feel free to interrupt me as I go along. So we start here in early Britain. The Romans, Julius Caesar invaded in 55 BC. There is evidence that wine growing was happening before even the Romans came here, but there's very little that we really know what happened. But we do know that the Romans were big into wine and they brought with them that tradition. So here we have a model of a Roman palace. This is a reinstatement of Fishbourne Palace, which is on the border between West Sussex and Hampshire. And in this Roman palace, it was discovered only about 100 years ago when a farmer was ploughing his field and came across these mosaics. There's a mosaic there of a Bacchus riding a dolphin, and some amphora here, some wine vessels. And you know, that just shows what interest there was back then. There is archaeology to show grape pollen, seed stalks and vine trellising, that it was indeed going on. There was viticulture with the Romans. Now, unfortunately, the Romans sort of fizzled out, and we then had the Vikings and various other intruders who weren't so interested. But we were fortunate enough in 1066 to be invaded again by the Normans. And the Normans, of course, came across the Channel from Normandy in France. And it's the only time that Britain, the whole of Britain, has ever been conquered by a foreign power. The Romans didn't go further north into Scotland. The Vikings never got hold of the whole of the UK, but the Normans did. And they came over, and the Bayeux Tapestry, which is a very famous tapestry that was made by the Norman families whilst the knights were over invading and taking over Britain, they decided to bring their own wine with them. They weren't going to risk it. So here's an extract of the Bayeux Tapestry showing the Normans bringing their own wine. And then very soon after the Romans, the Normans invaded, King William and his son William II set up a census which recorded everything that was owned, all the land. It was all about tax, of course. They wanted to know who owned what. And so the Domesday Book that was compiled in 1086 shows that at that time there were 46 vineyards in the southeast of England. And here's a diagram of where they were scattered around. Here you've got London, in the heart of the southeast. And of these 46 vineyards, only 12 of them were actually monasteries. So there was quite a lot of vineyards in private hands at that time, merrily making wine. Now, what happened after that? We have the medieval period. And if you see the bottom right-hand chart here, we have global average temperatures from the year dot to today. And between about 1000 and 1200 AD, average temperatures cooled. And we had what's called the Little Ice Age here between about 1450 and 1850. And because of this Little Ice Age, it was just no good making wine in Britain. And what we had all fizzled out for various other reasons. Of course, you know, most wine is made either below 50 degrees latitude or above 28 degrees. And England is 51 degrees. So we're just outside the sort of sweet spot, marginal climate. Of course, as we see what's happened with climate change and average temperatures going up now, we have this spike, which has been a help for England and Britain to grow wine again. But what really happened then in the medieval period was we were politically active in Europe and elsewhere in the world later on with our trading, and forming alliances really dictated our tastes and wine culture. So in the 12th century, you have Henry II married Eleanor Aquitaine, and here's a picture of them. And Aquitaine, southwest of France, Bordeaux, was all under the same king as England at this time. So the Bordeaux wine trade really emanated out of this alliance and the interest to supply the UK market with claret, the claret wines that Bordeaux was producing. Now, of course, our relationship with France wasn't always that happy, and we had the 100 Years' War. And during the 100 Years' War, wine was embargoed from France. You weren't allowed to import it because we were at war. The same thing happens today with places like North Korea and Iran. You know, there's trade embargoes. But what was actually happening was that ships laden with Bordeaux wine would leave the port of Bordeaux. They would head over into British waters, where private buccaneers would capture them and then take the wine as prize and then sell it, having accounted to the crown for the 50% tax on prize. So really what was going on here was a sort of cloak of an operation where wine was imported, but it was done through this clever mechanism of sanction busting. And that way the wine still made its way to market in the UK during the 100 Years' War. We then had alliances with Portugal, the Treaty of Windsor in 1386, free trade, always great, no tax, no import tax. You can bring the wine in. That encouraged consumption of Portuguese wine. And we then have Henry VIII, famously in 1536, who wanted a divorce. So he took Britain out of the Catholic Church, wouldn't give him a divorce, and dissolved the monasteries. And the monasteries at that time were one of the places where wine was still being made, but they were destroyed, particularly the monastery in Lewes, which was a very important cluniastic monastery, which today has a link to Nye Timber, which I'll come on to later. Nye Timber, a great producer of English sparkling wine, was under the monastery of Lewes, but obviously had to stop making wine when it was destroyed by Henry VIII and his acolytes. We then had a little spat with Spain in the 16th century. The Spanish Armada came to attack us, and before they attacked us, we attacked them in a preemptive strike on Cadiz. Sir Francis Drake nipped round through the Straits of Gibraltar, ransacked the city of Cadiz, and stole 5,000 barrels of sherry and brought it back and flooded the market with sherry. And for the next 500 years, Britain has enjoyed sherry, partly as a poke in the eye to the Spanish. And here you have a lovely picture of Falstaff, Shakespeare's character, enjoying some sack, as it was called, some sherry in a jug here in London, probably something that was stolen from Spain by Francis Drake. Our navy, of course, was successful, and in the 1600s, the East India Company was founded, a trading company which developed into our UK being a bit of a superpower. And at the time, we had the saying, an empire on which the sun never sets. And so trading all over the world, a rich nation under Elizabeth I was where it was at really in this period. So we weren't making our own wine, but we were going around either stealing it or trading in order to get it. And it was in this century that something that only recently came to light that was quite significant in the history of Champagne, in that Dr. Christopher Merritt in 1662, a scientist who was researching bottle fermentation, discovered that you could make wine deliberately fizzy by adding a little extra sugar and letting it ferment in the bottle to create sparkling wine. I think he was really experimenting more with cider and perry at the time, but he wrote a paper and he documented it. And this was significantly about 10 years before Dom Perignon was cellar master in Hauteville Abbey in Champagne. So we can claim that actually Champagne wasn't invented in Champagne, it was invented here in Great Britain. Now moving on, we had more treaties with Portugal, Treaty of Methuen, and the port trade originated from around this time with the sweetened wine that was a style developed again for the English market. So throughout this period, we weren't really producers, but we were consumers, and the emergence of the fine wine market and the fine wine trade and all the trading that goes on today in London happened against this background. And I just think it's important to cap on that to show why we've come to where we are today, which is modern day wine in Britain can really be dated from 1953, when after the Second World War, Hambledon planted up some vines. And these mostly in the 50s, 60s and 70s, we were planting Germanic varieties because they were suitable for growing in a cool climate, a cold, windswept, rainy climate like northern Germany can be, but unfortunately without the nice long autumns. But we did start producing some wine then that was, when I was growing up, you know, you were aware that there was a little bit of English wine if you wanted to be daring. But it wasn't anything that great, and we certainly didn't go around shouting about it or trying to export it. But we then joined the EEC in 1973, and there's a lovely little story around this that some of you may know, but when Stephen Spurrier, the late great Stephen Spurrier of the Judgment of Paris fame, who was a wine merchant in France in the 60s and 70s, was asked to arrange some wines for the ceremony in Paris when the UK had joined the EEC in 1973. And the Queen Elizabeth II, came over to meet President Pompidou for a banquet to celebrate our joining the EEC, or EU as it became. And of course, the wine that he bought was from Hambledon, and he bought this English wine in through French customs, landed at the airport, and they wouldn't let it in because they said, "Non existe pas." Doesn't exist. They simply were in denial that Britain had any wine. It wasn't in the list, couldn't bring it in. So after a bit of conversation, they did let it in, and it was served to the Queen and Pompidou. But that was where we were, you know, in 50 years ago. Now, suddenly, in the late 80s, we have the beginnings of sparkling wine being made. A few people had experimented in the mid-80s, but it was really Nye Timber who were the first to go all in, planting Chardonnay, Pinot Noir, Pinot Meunier, the Champagne varieties in West Sussex. And their first vintage was 1992. And that won so many awards that people who were interested in wine at the time discovered actually England can make good sparkling wine. But it took a while to cotton on. I mean, I remember I probably had my first English sparkling wine in about 2001, which was a Ridgeview. Now, Ridgeview planted in 1995. So they'd just started making at the end of the 1990s. Ridgeview is also in Sussex, in East Sussex, a place called Ditchling. And actually I have a bottle of Ridgeview with me tonight, so I might just have myself a little bit of that as I'm talking to you about it. Now, so these two pioneers, Nightimber and Ridgeview, really set the benchmark, showing that this was a good idea and it could work. And since then, we've had many others cotton on and plant up vineyards. We have, in 2016, we had a conference here about cool climate wines. And of course, in 2020, we left the EU. But because we left the EU, the government decided that we should rejoin the Organisation International du Vin, the OIV. Britain is now a member of the OIV, which is a discussion forum for governments to talk about wine regulation, legislation, and standards. So we're back in the game. Now, what are we doing today? We are 178 wineries, mostly in England, and we have 800 vineyards. So the wineries make the wine, but there's quite a lot of vineyards there who just grow the grapes and then either sell them or trade them or have a winery make the wine for their own vineyard name. And last year, the harvest in 2020 produced about 8 million bottles, give or take. And we see there what the trajectory was over the last 5 years. So 2015, we were producing 5 million bottles. 2018, we had a bumpy year with 13 million bottles. So the rolling average, if you look at this past 5-6 years, is around 8 million bottles. So 2020 was an average year in terms of volume. We are exporting around 10%. And of course, I mentioned imported wines. We're importing 1.6 billion bottles. So you can do the maths, but we are still importing massively more bottles than we can possibly produce ourselves. 200 to 1 is my reckoning on that. Now, where are the vineyards? So 76% of them are in the southeast of England. There you've got London in the middle. So in the home counties, the counties that surround London, Sussex is here, east and west, Kent, Hampshire, Surrey. And then you've got the West Country with some very fine wines coming all the way down from Cornwall. And East Anglia, very good farming country, good soils. A lot of vineyards in East Anglia actually grow the grapes and then sell them to wineries in the southeast to make the wine in the southeast nearer the market. But a lot of the farming is actually done in East Anglia. Now, the varieties we have, I mentioned Pinot Noir and Chardonnay, they make up 70%. And then we have 13% Bacchus, a white variety used mostly for still wines, and then a few others as well. They're sort of listed there, but they're all quite small amounts. Pinot Gris and Pinot Blanc are perhaps ones to watch because they seem to be doing well. Now, as I said, mostly it's sparkling wine. We call it the classic method now, the classic method, traditional method, of which there was about 5 million bottles made last year and about 3 million bottles of still. This is the new logo that WINEGB launched last year to denote classic sparkling wine, so as to distinguish it from other types of sparkling wine, which I'll talk about a bit later. Now, the geology in the UK is complex. Here's an overview of it, but what you do have are these yellow bands of chalk, which are the same chalk here you see at the coast. This is the Seven Sisters in Sussex going up to Eastbourne, and similar when you go around to Kent, the famous White Cliffs of Dover. In fact, I often see people put up clips and say, oh, it's the White Cliffs of Dover, and actually it's the Seven Sisters. But anyway, it's the same chalk as goes under the channel and comes up again the other side of Paris for Champagne region. So the chalk hills also gives us a bit of aspect. The aspect is obviously helpful when the vineyards can face the sun, get a bit more light and be sheltered from the winds, and great for drainage. And it warms up faster than the clay soils. So in the summer, it's a good good place to grow grapes, particularly Chardonnay. A lot of the winemakers say their Chardonnay does wonderfully well on chalk, whereas the Pinot Noir can do well on the green sand and a bit of clay as well. So we have some green sand, which is a bit rarer. It's this light turquoise color here, but some of the Nyetimber vineyards are on green sand. So rainfall. Now, if one thing is Britain is famous for, other than bad food and till recently bad wine, it's being very wet. And here is a diagram of the rainfall that shows it's pretty up and down, pretty up and down. But what we have got is slightly improved patterns. So although that more of the rain now comes in the winter, it means that summers are a bit drier during the growing season, which is better, although we can have some heavy showers at times as well. But there's certainly not a shortage of water here. We're never going to have a problem with irrigation. And the warming I mentioned earlier, after the mini ice age, we have in the 20th century seen average growing degree days. So this is a measure of how many days in the summer are good for grapes to ripen, is gradually going up, hence helping us make better wines. And the yield there, we can see how much production we're getting from per acre. And all throughout the 20th century, it was fairly modest, but suddenly now our yields have got better. And that's also a function of improved techniques. We've got better at managing the vineyards. And obviously the production volumes is up and down. 2012 was a terrible year. There's very little produced that year. And 2018, we have the spike. But on an average year, as I said, we're getting about 8 to 10 million bottles. Now, the sparkling wines, there's about 30 or 40 really good, well-known or becoming well-known brands of wine. And I've mentioned a couple already, but there are many more. And this is a very interesting slide. This slides will be available, but it's developed by Tom Hewson, who is a sparkling wine expert, 6 atmospheres. And he's really categorized all these English wine estates into the different styles. So if you know what style of wine you like, bright acidic or more creamy, more broad, oaky, or more clean and precise, you can see on here where your preferences might lie. I mean, personally, I quite like the broad, creamy. I'm a bit of a hedonist when it comes to wine style, so I'm in this sort of quadrant here. But there are some people, a lot of the wine critics and prefer the leaner, crisper style, and that's really what English wine is made a name for itself being. And it's partly a function, of course, of climate, but also choices by the winemaker. Now, what does our wine go with? Well, great British food deserves great British wine. And we do have some wonderful shellfish. We have the lobster and crab and oysters, scallops and mussels from around our coast. And that goes well with the style. Asparagus, just coming to the end of the asparagus season, but that goes pretty well with the still Bacchus wines. And then we have our array of cheeses, cows, goats, sheep's cheeses, also going nicely, a bit like, the Sancerre goes well with goat's cheese. A lot of our wines go nicely with the dry white wines and sparkling wines. Fish and chips, absolute winner. English sparkling wine goes really well. The crisp acidity cutting through the greasy chips and the batter on the fish, really great accompaniment, well salted. And then our roast beef, that's a classic joint there with some Yorkshire puddings, gravy on the side. And the Pinot Noir wines that we're making now, either rosé, sparkling, still, or even some red wines go nicely with a nice rare roast beef, making me feel hungry again. In terms of classifying our wines, we really have just one area for England and one area for Wales. Each of them has a protected designation of origin or an appellation or PDO or geographical indication. These are all essentially means the same thing, and it just denotes that 100% of the grapes come from that area. For sparkling wines to be called English sparkling or Welsh sparkling, They must be lees aged for 9 months. That's the same as Cremant. In France, Champagne is 12 months. We're looking at reviewing this. We might put it up, but at the moment, that's where it is. And we also have a couple of regional appellations emerging. So Sussex has developed its own appellation. The owners of Rathfinny Estate. There's going to be a Shane dinner at Rathfinny Estate next year, 13th of May. Put it in your diary. Look out for the invite. Only 30 places, but Rathfinny is a wonderful, beautiful estate planted up on the Downs here in East Sussex. And they spearheaded getting a Sussex appellation. And then Cornwall, I mentioned, Camel Valley in Cornwall, just outside of Padstow, where Rick Stein and his wonderful seafood restaurants and recipes come from, has a particular part of the estate called Darnabole, which is very good for Bacchus. And they actually have a monopole appellation just for Darnabole Bacchus. It's quite an unusual appellation, but that's one that not many people know about. I said I'd talk about sustainability. So Tal mentioned Wines of Great Britain and that I'm a director. I'm just one of the board of directors. I'm not an executive, but the professional Chris Foss, who used to run Plumpton College, set up a group to develop a sustainability scheme, which started a year ago. And I'm on the certification panel for that. So if a vineyard reaches certain criteria that they are growing the grapes and making the wine in a more sustainable way, they can get an award of this logo and be audited and certified as sustainable. There's obviously some organic vineyards in England. Albury is a very good organic, and they have some biodynamic wine. Oxney is another organic. And if you're sustainable and you're making the classic method sparkling wine, you get to use this logo, which has a nice little butterfly showing not only is it great, it is British, it is classic method, and it is made in a sustainable way. So hopefully that'll give consumers signposts to make their choices responsibly when they choose the wines. Now, I said I'd touch on still wines. So 30% of the wines now are still. Most of them are white. There are some reds and some rosés, but 4 particular white wines I wanted to pick out that have won awards, very top awards. Winbury in Norfolk in East Anglia won a platinum best in show in Decanter in 2017. Stopham for their Pinot Gris won best English still wine. Gusbourne in Kent for their Chardonnay, their Pinot Noir, and their Rosé Pinot Noir, have won lots of medals for those. And Simpson's, also in Kent, produces some very well acclaimed still wines. There's a couple of others as well, but look out for the emergence of these wonderful still wines. So what's the future? Well, we have the sparkling wine, we have the still wine, we have rosé wines. We now have Charmat wines. So Fitz is a Charmat wine made the same way as Prosecco. So the second fermentation to make it fizzy goes on in the winery in a tank, and then it's transferred under pressure into a bottle. It enables you to make more wine and keep the production coming as it's needed to be drawn off. There's a few others making Charmat sparkling. We have here a wine called Petnat, or Petulant Nature, which is a play on the words Petulant Naturel, which is another very ancient way of making sparkling wine, where the wine goes into the bottle, stays in the bottle, goes through one fermentation, all the carbon dioxide is trapped, and it becomes sparkling in a slightly different way to champagne and English traditional method sparkling wine. But that's one of the other wines I had last night, Westwell in Kent, and they have this beautiful label for their, this is called Naturally Petulant, which is the next vintage up from this one. And then Quervy, this rather quirky wine here is from East Sussex, from Tillingham. The Tillingham winemaker used to be at Gusbourne, so he moved from a very traditional large estate to do more innovative styles of experimental wines, small batches. So we have a lot going on. There's quite a lot of places you can go if you want to read up more, but I'm very keen to take your questions. So I will stop sharing my presentation now, check on the time, and invite questions. So if Tal would like to chair them, or just let's see how we go.
I mean, we can unmute yourself and ask a question. I'm ready to start the first question and give kind of a boost to the others to dare and ask questions. When we think about British wines, sparkling wine, we think about what we call the classic method or the méthode champenoise. But usually it's Chardonnay, Blanc de Blanc, and the combination of Pinot Noir, Chardonnay, and Meunier. But as I saw, they're experimenting in different grape varieties. So I saw with Breaky Bottom, they do a Sèvres Blanc sparkling wine, which is not a Chardonnay, and it's totally different, very, very fresh, very, very acidic, but different. Do you have more example of this kind of innovation in sparkling wine technique?
Dominic, could I give a little answer to that to Tal? Where we are in Winchester, we are surrounded by vineyards, and one of them, Danebury, has been making a sparkling wine by the classic method with Bacchus for 25 years. And it's called Cossack. You can mainly you can find it at race courses around the country and quite a number of restaurants from London down to the coast.
Interesting.
Sparkling Bacchus.
Yeah.
Excellent.
Has anyone else had any other great varieties from England not yet mentioned? So
Sèvres Blanc.
the Sèvres, yeah. So the Sèvres Blanc is a hybrid grape that came from Germany. It was a crossing with some Riesling and I think Madeleine Royale, which took very well in the UK. It crops well, it ripens nicely, and it's one of the many Germanic varieties that were planted up in the 1970s. And it's become particularly of note because Breaky Bottom and Camel Valley both win a lot of medals with their Sèvres Blanc wine. The difficulty is that because it's a hybrid, the European wine rules did not allow it to be an appellation, or at least a PDO, the top appellation, because they considered those kind of grapes not sufficiently high quality to be eligible for appellations. But those rules are set to change, not just because Britain's left the EU, but I think the EU are looking at revising those as well. So if you want to market wine and say we have a great appellation, it's as good as champagne, it's the same status, it's been a slight PR problem for Sèvres Blanc, but absolutely, definitely, the quality of Sèvres Blanc is really good, and they win gold medals just as much as the Chardonnay and Pinot ones. The style is different. The style of Sèvres Blanc, as Tal said, it is quite refined, it is quite linear, it is quite crisp, it is lots of white flowers, citrus, hedgerow. I think Jancis Robinson described it as hedgerow in a glass. So English springtime, when the buds are coming out, the hawthorn is there, you get these lovely aromas that is really reminiscent of the English countryside. And that's really what Sèvres Blanc conveys. Chardonnay can be similar, but Chardonnay and Pinot, you're getting into a richer style, a bit more red fruit, and more similar to the Champagne with the same grape varieties. So Sèvres is a great product that we have. It's pretty well unique. Bacchus as well is doing really well. We've had a lot of focus on tasting Bacchus, still wines as well as sparkling. I think, Philip, I'm interested to try the Cossack. I haven't had that one. I know that Chapel Down are doing a sparkling Bacchus, which I'm not convinced about, to be honest. It's had some positive reviews, but it's not made in the traditional method. It's not even made in Charmat method. It's made by the Pompe Bicyclette method, or aeration. So just be careful, read the back labels when you're choosing your wine if it doesn't say what method
next time you come to Winchester, it'll be my pleasure to serve you a Cossack. It is not my favourite sparkler from England by a long way. And to me, the Bacchus, in fact, even when I like the Camel Valley, is not a particular favourite of mine. But I find them have a rather slightly green, slightly bitter finish to them, which doesn't please me.
Mm-hmm.
Excellent. More questions?
Maybe for me, it's not about wine. I discovered lots of things about British wines I had absolutely no clue. But what I remark is the design of the labels. They're so, I would have expected more classical, but they are not at all. And I seem like to feel an artwork behind it. Or is that just my impression, or is there some ideas behind it?
Good question. I think there are a variety of labels. When we started making sparkling wine in the 90s and 2000s, the labels were more traditional, more classic. But gradually people have decided that they want to present their wines in a more modern way to really say that we're doing our own thing. We're not just trying to copy champagne. We have great modern wines, great designs. So Ridgeview, for example, they recently rebranded their labels. So you can see here, it's quite a modern emblem there, a sort of simpler 1920s type font without serifs. And Night Timber is similar, Gusbourne is similar. But then some of the other wines I showed you at the end, they really are fantastic labels. I mean, this one, this Naturally Petulant, this is an artist who's, she and her husband make the wine, and she does the labels. And every wine she has a different label. You know, with an in-house artist and designer, they can do that. But they are great. They are really, yeah. And thanks for remarking on that.
And also thanks, Fran, that shows us all the time the bottles that
I work in wine branding, so I've got any number around my desk. So the Chapeldown, the Gusbourne, Dulwood, that's in Devon, and Black Chalk, that's a far more avant-garde style label. But also I have the Seyval Blanc that I'm growing for Dominic at the moment, because Dominic owns the world's smallest registered vineyard. And I'm adding an extra vine to it, but I'm having to grow these little ones because I prune in local vineyards. And so I've been growing these quite carefully for a few months now, Dominic, so at least you've seen them now. They're doing okay.
Thank you, Fran. Thanks. And what's your favorite label, do you think? What of the English ones, which ones do you really like?
I like the more classic. I think I really like Gusbourne. I like the texture of it. I loved Night Timber when it first came out. I've got that over there. Should I get it? Hang on a minute. Basically, I think if they've got texture to them, this is the one that I did the branding for. Sorry, hopping all around.
Just be careful.
Sorry, yes, exactly. Night Timber, that's the old style, whereas the new style they've revamped it, but it's got lots and lots of texture, lots and lots of layers of interest. This was done originally to be like a sommelier's napkin wrapping around the top, and it was the first to do a really expensive embossed foil, which was, I mean, a lot of others have done it since. They're all different. This one's got standout. Chapeldown's very, very good with its red stripe. It's just got huge amounts of on-shelf presence in a bar, in a restaurant, a list. It's the easiest way to identify and remember. And I was at Tinwood the other day, and they have 3 styles, and they always present it in a 1, 2, 3 order, and they always present it in yellow, red, and pink. And so people just say, I like the red one, or I like number 2. So the easier the navigation it is, probably the better, if that's helpful.
Great, thank you.
Can I ask a question also? Thank you. Is it so that your own people are buying more and more their English wines when you go back to 5, maximum 10 years? They drink more their own products?
Yes, I think that's absolutely happening. I think you know, one of the challenges has just been to get our own people to know that we're making wine, because you ask 100 random people and probably 50 of them still won't even know we're making good wines. But the 50 or so who do know, hopefully are becoming won over. And whereas 20 years ago,
To be honest, I didn't hear.
Dominic,
yeah.
Dominic, we lost you for a minute,
Yes,
and it was really unclear. If you can repeat the question, the answer, please.
Okay, thank you. There are definitely more British people now buying British wines. The challenge has been getting people to know it's there. I don't know if I've frozen again. It looks like I may have frozen again.
Down 10 years ago, about between 8 and 10 years ago. But my God, we had to stop after 2-3 years because people just didn't want to try. They were not open for wines from Belgium, from England. Even Austria was not the favorite. So it's a pity that we lost those people as a partner, but maybe we can start again, of course. We had their sparkling wines, the Bacchus, some still wines. And I did visit them. I paid a visit over there, which was already a marvelous experience. But now the problem is that people are starting to drink their own wines that we make in Belgium. So I think when I start again with English products, I'm not sure I will have the possibility to sell them well. It's not.
They should sell a lot better now, Dominique, than they do.
Maybe I should start again, yes.
Yeah, it's the fact that in international blind tasting throughout the world against champagnes, we've got the acidity that champagne, due to climate change, would have had 10 years ago, and they're warming up rather now. Yeah. So I think you're exactly right. I think we've got Dominic back again, but it's basically our fellow country people are definitely buying lots. They're loving supporting local. I think particularly seeing following the pandemic, during the pandemic, the fact that local vineyards could deliver. There are various apps that you can search all the vineyards in England, and normally you are less than 25 minutes away from a vineyard anywhere.
Yeah. They're getting more and more open for the cool climate wines. That's true. And sparkling wines are a bit the evident production of your place as it is in Belgium. What astonished me a bit is that you have about 3,800 hectares of wine. We only have about 700. And did I understand well that you have 178 wine makers?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Winemaking facilities.
Yeah. We have 178 wineries now. That they range from Nye Timber and Ridgeview, who are on Chapel Down making hundreds of thousands of bottles, or in some cases over 1 million bottles, down to small wineries making. I mean, Breaky Bottom, for example, they have 5 acres. They make 20,000 bottles in a good year.
But you have a lot of big companies, and that's the contrary in Belgium. Of course, we are a much smaller country. We only have about 700 acres, but we have more than 250 winemakers. So it's very different in production and in, let's say, the company style. Here we started with small production for a hobby and a passion, but all the rest is very similar. So I'm very pleased that I could take part and to hear the same things a bit, and let's go to sell them more.
Dominic, do you know the stats of how many winemakers we've got? Because we've got very, very good international winemakers, but a lot of winemakers make for many different marks and brands. So there are probably 20 key winemakers, and then there are a lot of others. There are some that are hobbyists that have taught themselves, which is wonderful. But I don't know whether we know the stats, Dominic.
Well, if there's 178 wineries, there must be 178 winemakers.
Yes.
because some of them will be making wines for others as well as their own wines. There are a couple who are purely contract winemakers. The 3,800 hectares, be careful with that, because 70% of that is producing just. 30% are planted but not yet producing because they're young vines. Last year we planted over 1 million vines. So, you know, so the actual production figures are 2,000 something hectares.
Okay.
Yeah.
Dominic, I want to ask you a question that it was asked by with the chat about export. People are asking, where can we find British wines or British sparkling wine outside Britain?
Well, it depends where you are in the world as to whether there is any wine exported to your market. And we are exporting 10% at the moment. We're trying to increase that 20%. Some producers want to export half of what they make, but it's still a small amount and most of it's consumed here. But there are wines imported to Belgium, Germany, even Paris. The largest markets are the Scandinavian countries, Norway, Sweden, Finland, and then US and Canada and Japan.
Then Australia.
Australia.
It's catching up a little bit, yeah.
Yeah.
But there are a number of countries that you still can't readily access, and within America, there are a number of states that they can't. Okay, it's very restricted by state at the moment, isn't it, Dominic?
Yeah. Well, the whole the system in the US is difficult, but the big producers, so Nye Timber, Gusbourne, Hattingley, Ridgeview, they all export and they all want to expand their exports. So you can ask them, who is your distributor in Belgium, or who, and find out. And if they haven't got someone, well, maybe they'll be interested in doing it, because if the consumers are saying, I want to buy your wine, eventually the message will get back and it will find a way, like it did in the 100 Years' War.
So just to answer Amanda, not yet in the UAE. Will be there, it will be there, but not yet.
The UAE, they have some in the airport, the Dubai duty free.
The duty free.
Yeah, duty free. They have Nye Timber, Hattingley, and Camel Valley, I think.
And Hattingley served transatlantic on British Airways to America, and they did the first TV advertising campaign, starring one of my friends who's half Italian, half French, and is a wonderful parody of a sort of Stella Artois style advert where they're saying, "Oh, c'est formidable, c'est ça," and then they go, "C'est anglais," and then at that point they sort of go to be shocked. It's a very, very beautiful advert.
So that.
So Amanda's just asked, will she find some in her Tesco's? Probably. Tesco's do stock English wines.
Yeah.
Waitrose and Marks and Spencer's are very good for their English wines.
Yeah, Tesco have got Balfour, Hush Heath, and then they've got some of their own label as well. Waitrose has got the most extensive range across the UK. And the others, Marks and Spencer's, they've all got them. They've all got them, but it's again, it's demand driven, and demand is getting greater the whole time. But we've also, Dominic, we've got a huge wine tourism offering. So a lot of these vineyards they've all got their own quirky nature, quirky owners with passions for sports cars or dogs, or there are any number of things. So it's a lovely visitor experience, whichever vineyard you go to. A lot of them do volunteer picking. Then they give you amazing lunch and sometimes money and definitely wine to go back with. But it's memorable experiences, and for us in this country, it's so nice to have it on our doorstep for a change. My daughter's done 3 vintages. She's only 13. She's done 3 vintages of pruning and picking now, and you can do that. You don't have to go to New Zealand anymore or France. So that makes it nice too. It's dynamic, isn't it, Dominic?
And Marcel's just mentioned he found somewhere in Switzerland that will sell Nye Timber. So that's what you need to do. A bit like if you want Swiss wine in England, you have to go out of your way to find it. But it is here, and our wine, will be available in some markets. So Leslie, I can see nodding in an approving way, which I'm grateful, as Grand Echazon. Is any comments you'd like to add?
No,
No, Dominic, I think you've done an absolutely fantastic presentation. You've managed to really, I hope, introduce British wines to the wider Shen OMGD, as Dominique said. So I think I certainly, on behalf of Shen GB, I wanted to thank you for doing such an amazing job in presenting it.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Yeah.
So any other questions or comments?
Any more questions?
No, a comment though. Dominic, we'll let you get back to your ridge view.
I'd love to see that slide again, Dominic, of the references. I know this is all going to be available on YouTube, but the references slide again would be lovely to see, please.
Okay, I'll send it to you, Fran.
Thank you.
Right. So thank you very much, Dominic Buckwell, for this amazing presentation. I think for everybody, we learn a lot and discover that actually not only Britain make wine, they make quality wine and award-winning wines. And I'm sure everybody now around the globe wants to try some of the sparkling or English wines. We have at home here a nice collection of sparkling English wine. And I have to say, we enjoy it every time. Not even as a surprise anymore. We just, you know, we understand, yes, Britain is making marvelous wine, and we discover the Bacchus and we discover the other varieties, so it's really, really pleasant and nice. Just to remind everybody, every last Sunday of the month, we do another presentation like that. Next month, we have, I think, the French champagne. So it's going to be nice to see champagne.
Excuse me.
Is it not the champagne? Is it the Portuguese wine?
Next is in August.
Oh, okay.
Next month we have the port wine.
Port wine, yes, the Portugal wine. So we have the Douro wines and the Portuguese Portugal wines. So it's going to be quite interesting to see the revival of the port wine in the world. So please join us next month also, every Sunday at the end of the month at 5 o'clock London time. And don't forget to go into our social media, to the Instagram and the Facebook on OMGDGlobal. OMGDGlobal, look for us and share your thoughts, your wines, your desires. And if you want us to do something to approach a new area in the world, any country, any subject that you want us to do, please write to us and we'll try to make it happen. Mohammed, would you like to say a few words, last words for us? Chairman Mohammed?
Yes, I'm sorry about my networking here. It's not properly connected. So just apologize for being on and off all the time. But I would like to thank all the participants for joining this event. I would like to thank our presenter, Dominic, for this excellent presentation, which I missed most of it, but I'm going to watch it online. Philip Evans, thank you once again for supporting us, for your contribution. This is the second time you contribute with a presenter, and we appreciate that very much. You know, so we count on you all the time. So as Tal said, please don't forget to join us every month. Last Sunday of the month, there is an event at 5 o'clock London local time. So we hope to see you all again and wish you all the very best. Thank you.
Great to see you all. Enjoy your Sunday evening. See you soon.
Thank you.
Thank you
Thank you very much.
Cheers.
Thank you, everybody.